The thing about ambition is that it has a smell. Not metaphorically, literally. It smells like the inside of a leather portfolio that cost more than you could comfortably afford, like the particular dry clean freshness of a blazer worn for the first time, like the coffee you drank too fast at 7:15 because the subway was running local and you were going to be late and being late was not, on this specific morning, an option you were willing to accept. Mara Ellis smelled like all three of these things when she pushed through the revolving door of the Caldwell Group headquarters at 8:52 on a Thursday morning in April. She had 8 minutes. 8 minutes to find the elevator, find the 14th floor, find the office of whoever was conducting the internship interviews for the Caldwell Group's communications division, and present herself as the most capable, prepared, and professionally composed 24-year-old they had seen all week. She had been preparing for this for 6 weeks. She had researched the Caldwell Group the way other people researched countries they were moving to. Thoroughly, obsessively, with the particular hunger of someone who understood that this was not just a job but a direction. The Caldwell Group was a privately held investment and communications conglomerate, 14 years old, with a portfolio that spanned media, technology, and real estate and a reputation for promoting from within that made the internship program genuinely competitive. 312 applications for 11 spots. Mara had been one of the 11. She had a portfolio. She had a presentation prepared on a tablet. She had answers to every question she could anticipate, organized by category, reviewed 3 times on the subway. What she did not have, it turned out, was the correct elevator. The Caldwell Group building had 2 elevator banks. This was not mentioned in the confirmation email, which had said proceed to the main lobby and take the elevators to the 14th floor with the breezy confidence of instructions written by someone who knew the building. The main lobby had 2 sets of elevators on opposite walls, with no signage distinguishing them, and at 8:53 in the morning both sets had a small crowd waiting in front of them and Mara had 8 minutes and she went to the one on the right because the one on the left had more people and time was the variable she could least afford to lose. She pressed 14. The elevator moved. It passed 14 without stopping. She pressed 14 again, with the specific pressure of someone who believed buttons responded to conviction. The elevator stopped at 28. She stepped out into a corridor that was immediately, obviously, not the 14th floor of anything. The 14th floor of the Caldwell Group, according to everything she had read, housed the communications and marketing division, open plan, glass walls, the controlled creative energy of people who worked in brand strategy. This floor was different. Quieter. The carpet was deeper. The light was the particular quality of spaces where significant decisions were made, not harsh, not welcoming, just serious. At the far end of the corridor, a set of frosted glass double doors with the Caldwell Group logo etched into them. A woman appeared from a side office. 50s, silver hair cut precisely, the kind of professional efficiency that had been refined over decades into something close to art. She looked at Mara. She looked at a tablet in her hand. She looked at Mara again. "Ms. Ellis," she said. Mara blinked. "Yes, but I think there's been." "You're the last one. We've been expecting you." She was already moving toward the double doors. The others had been seated for 20 minutes. "Please follow me. I need to explain," Mara started. "You can explain tardiness to Mr. Caldwell if he asks," the woman said, opening the double doors. There are moments where the gap between what you mean to do and what you actually do is bridged by the sheer velocity of someone else's expectation, and this was one of them. Mara followed the woman through the double doors because the woman's certainty was a current too strong to swim against at 8:54 in the morning with 8 minutes still theoretically on the clock even though they had clearly already expired. She walked into the room. It was a boardroom. Not the kind of boardroom where people argued about quarterly projections. The kind of boardroom that existed to make an impression. Long table of pale wood, chairs in dark leather, a wall of windows showing Manhattan from 28 floors up, the city laid out below like an argument for scale. On one wall, an arrangement of fresh flowers that someone had clearly thought about. On the table, name cards, crystal water glasses, a small portfolio at each seat. 6 women sat at the table. They were all, to varying degrees, dressed and composed in the manner of people who had been briefed on the importance of the occasion and had responded accordingly. The woman to Mara's immediate left was wearing a dress that Mara recognized from a magazine she had read in a waiting room 3 weeks ago. The woman at the far end had the specific grooming of someone with a professional team. Mara was wearing the blazer she had dry cleaned for the internship interview. She stood in the doorway and understood, with the cold clarity of someone whose brain was processing information faster than her face could respond to it, that she was not on the 14th floor. She was not at an internship interview. She did not know what she was at. "Please take the remaining seat," the silver-haired woman said, from somewhere behind her. There was one empty chair. It had a name card. Ms. M. Ellis. Mara sat down. She looked at the woman to her left, the one in the magazine dress, and said, very quietly, "What is this?" The woman looked at her with the polite wariness of someone who had not expected to be making new friends today. "The Caldwell selection," she said. "Selection for what position?" Mara said, equally quietly. The woman's polite wariness upgraded to something closer to disbelief. "His wife," she said. Mara looked at the name card in front of her. She looked at the room. She looked at the door, which the silver-haired woman had just closed from the outside. She looked at the chair at the head of the table, which was empty, and which had no name card, because the person who sat there did not need one. Then the door at the far end of the room opened, and Oliver Caldwell walked in. She knew his face. Everyone in the Caldwell Group's communications division knew his face, because the company's internal culture materials, she had read them, of course she had read them, she had read everything, included a message from the CEO with a photograph. He was 36 in the photograph, which had been taken 2 years ago, and he looked in at the way CEOs look in official photographs. Composed, directed, the product of good lighting and the knowledge that the image would be seen by many people. He looked different in person. Taller, first of all. The photograph had not communicated the specific quality of someone who occupied space with intention, not aggression, not performance, just the settled certainty of a person who had been in charge of significant things for long enough that it had become simply how he moved through rooms. Dark hair, close cut. A suit that was not trying to impress anyone because it didn't need to. A face that was, she noticed this the way she noticed things she didn't mean to notice, quickly and against her own preference, genuinely interesting. Not conventionally handsome in the magazine sense. Interesting. The kind of face that had been shaped by thinking rather than by youth. He walked to the head of the table, set down a single folder, and looked at the room. His gaze moved from left to right, acknowledging, assessing, doing the thing that people at the top of organizations learn to do, reading a room in seconds, cataloging what mattered, filing the rest. He got to the end of the table. He got to Mara. He stopped. Not obviously. Not dramatically. Just, the movement of his gaze paused, held, continued. Half a second longer than it had been anywhere else. Then he sat down and opened the folder. "Thank you all for coming," he said. His voice was what she might have expected, even, controlled, the voice of someone for whom public speaking had long since stopped being an effort. "I'll be honest with you about this process, as I've tried to be from the beginning. This is not a standard arrangement and I'm not going to pretend it is. My board asked me to participate. I agreed under specific conditions, which my team has communicated to each of you." A pause. "I have 2 requests. First, that you are honest in this room. Not strategic, not performed, honest. Second, that if at any point this process doesn't feel right to you, you say so. I have no interest in anyone being here against their better judgment." A pause. Mara thought about her better judgment, which was currently screaming at a volume she was having difficulty managing. "We'll begin with introductions," Oliver said. "Name, what you do, and one thing that's true about you that isn't on the briefing document." He looked at the woman on the far left. "Ms. Chen." The introductions moved around the table. Sophia Chen, art consultant, collected vintage maps. Diane Park, architect, couldn't parallel park despite designing parking structures. Vivian Ross, financial analyst, had been a competitive fencer. Claire Okafor, journalist, was afraid of escalators. Rachel Kim, nonprofit director, had lived in 7 countries. They got to Mara. Every face at the table was looking at her. Oliver Caldwell was looking at her. She had approximately 4 seconds to decide what to do, and the 4 seconds were the 4 seconds in which she understood that the silver-haired woman had her name on a list, that there was a name card, that someone somewhere in this building believed she was supposed to be in this room, and that explaining all of this clearly and honestly was, she was going to do that, she was absolutely going to do that, just as soon as she had said her name. Mara Ellis, she said. I work in communications. Both of these things were true. She worked in the communications department of her previous employer, which was why the Caldwell Group's communications internship had been the natural next step, which was why she was here, on the wrong floor, in the wrong room, looking at a man who had stopped his gaze on her for half a second and who was waiting for the one true thing that wasn't on the briefing document. She didn't have a briefing document. She had no idea what was on it. One true thing, Oliver said. She looked at him. I'm in the wrong room, she said. The silence lasted approximately 3 seconds. It had the quality of a silence that is deciding what kind of silence it wants to be. Oliver Caldwell looked at her with an expression she couldn't fully read, not quite amused, not quite surprised, something more careful than either. Explain, he said. I have an internship interview on the 14th floor at 9 o'clock, she said, because honesty had started now and stopping it seemed worse than continuing. I took the wrong elevator. The woman outside told me to sit down before I could explain, and then the door was closed and she looked at the name card in front of her. There's a name card with my name on it, which I don't fully understand. The silver-haired woman appeared from nowhere. She had a talent for this, Mara was learning, and murmured something near Oliver's ear. He listened. He nodded once. There are 2 M. Ellis files in the screening database, he said, to the room in general and to Mara specifically. An M. Ellis who applied for this process, and an M. Ellis who applied for the communications internship. A beat. The files were conflated at some point in the administrative process. I see, Mara said. You're here for the internship. Floor 14, she confirmed. I have a portfolio and a presentation. He looked at her for a moment. The room was very quiet. 5 women who had prepared extensively for this were watching the exchange with a range of expressions spanning professional neutrality to barely contained fascination. Your interview, Oliver said, was scheduled for 9. It's currently 9:12. Mara looked at her watch. I'm aware. I can have someone call the 14th floor and explain the delay. I would appreciate that. He looked at her for another moment. Then he looked at his folder. Then, and she would think about this moment for a long time afterward, turning it over the way you turn over something small that turns out to be load-bearing, he said. Stay for the session. Mara looked at him. The internship interview will be rescheduled, he said. I'll ensure it. Stay for this session and then go to floor 14. Mr. Caldwell, one of the tablet people from the corner of the room said carefully, the protocol. Note the adjustment to protocol, he said, without looking up from the folder. Ms. Ellis stays. He looked at the woman on the far left. We'll continue. Mara sat very still in the chair with her name on the card in front of it and looked at the man at the head of the table who had just restructured a process designed to find him a wife in order to keep a woman who had wandered in from an internship interview, and she thought. Floor 14. I need floor 14. Floor 14 is a known quantity. Floor 28, apparently, was not. The session lasted 2 hours. It was not what she had expected. She had expected something that felt like a performance, the elaborate theater of a selection process, people presenting their best versions of themselves for evaluation. There was some of that. But Oliver Caldwell ran the session the way she was slowly understanding. He ran everything, with the specific efficiency of someone who had learned to distinguish quickly between what was real and what was arranged. He asked questions that were designed to slip under preparation. Not trick questions. Not gotcha questions. Just, the kind of questions that, if you had prepared an answer, the preparation showed, and if you hadn't prepared, the unprepared reality showed, and he was very clearly more interested in the unprepared reality. What have you changed your mind about in the last year? Not updated, actually reversed. What's something you're bad at that you've stopped trying to fix? Tell me about a time you stayed in a situation longer than you should have. What kept you there? The other women answered with varying degrees of authenticity. Sophia Chen was genuine, the vintage map's answer had been real, and her answers in the session had the same quality, the texture of someone saying what was true rather than what was suitable. Vivian Ross was strategic. Not dishonest, but curated, each answer the product of someone who understood the difference between transparency and exposure. The others were somewhere in the spectrum. Mara did not answer. She was not a candidate. She had made this clear. She sat at the table with her portfolio on her knees and watched. She was, as it turned out, very good at watching. She watched Oliver Caldwell conduct the session with the same attention she brought to every room she entered, the professional habit of someone trained in communications, where understanding the gap between what people said and what they meant was the fundamental skill. She watched the way he held a question after asking it, giving it room to breathe. The way he wrote something on the folder when an answer surprised him. The way his expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, when an answer was genuine versus when it was polished. He was good at this. She had not expected him to be this good at this. She also watched, from the corner of her eye, the way he occasionally looked at her. Not constantly. Not obviously. Just, periodically, in the gaps between questions, his attention moved to the woman at the end of the table who wasn't answering anything and who was, apparently, interesting to him for that reason. At the 90-minute mark, he asked, "What do you want?" Not from this process. From your life. What's the actual answer? He was looking at the table generally, which was his technique, asking the room rather than a specific person, letting each woman decide how to enter the answer. Sophia Chen talked about partnership and creative freedom. Vivian Ross talked about building something with another person that was larger than either alone. Claire Okafor talked about wanting roots after years of reporting from everywhere and nowhere. Oliver listened to all of it. He wrote something for Sophia's answer. He nodded at Claire's. Then he looked at Mara. "You've been quiet," he said. "I'm not a candidate," she said. "You're in the room. By administrative error." And yet. He held her gaze with the directness she was learning was simply how he looked at things he found worth looking at. "What do you want? From your life?" She could have deflected. She had 4 or 5 deflections available, professionally adequate, which would have moved the conversation along without requiring her to say anything real. She didn't use any of them. "I want work that matters," she said. "Not work that I'm told matters, work where I can see the effect of it, where the connection between what I do and what changes in the world is visible to me." She paused. "I want to be good enough at something to be trusted to do it without being managed. And I want someone who tells me the truth." She paused again. Those are probably not in the right order. The room was quiet. Oliver Caldwell looked at her for a moment longer than the question required. "Why the last one?" he said. "Because the first 2 I can build myself," she said. "The last one requires someone else." He wrote something in the folder. She looked out the window at Manhattan 28 floors down, and she thought, floor 14, I need floor 14. She got to the 14th floor at 11:20. The internship coordinator, a cheerful, harried woman named Bex who had been called by the 28th floor and had rescheduled Mara's slot with the equanimity of someone for whom the unexpected was a professional constant, sat her down in a glass-walled conference room and said, "So you were upstairs." "Wild." "How was it?" "Confusing," Mara said honestly. "I've heard stories about that process." "Very hush-hush." Bex looked at her with the frank curiosity of someone who knew she wasn't going to get details and was going to ask anyway. "What's he like?" "Caldwell?" Mara thought about the directness, the folder, the question about what she wanted. Focused, she said. Bex uncapped a pen. Right, then. Let's talk about why you want to join the Caldwell Communications team. The interview lasted 45 minutes. Mara used the presentation on her tablet. She answered every question with the composed fluency of someone who had prepared for 6 weeks and who had also, as it turned out, spent the preceding 2 hours in a room that made a communications internship interview feel, by comparison, extremely manageable. She left the building at 12:30. She did not think about the 28th floor. She thought about it the entire subway ride home. 2 days later, she received 2 emails within 4 minutes of each other. The first was from Bex, offering her the internship. The second was from an address she didn't recognize, caldwell.o@caldwellgroup.com, which said, Ms. Ellis. Congratulations on the internship. I was told this morning that you accepted. I wanted to say, the answer about the last one requiring someone else. I've been thinking about it. Oh, Caldwell. She read it 3 times. She typed and deleted 4 responses. She sent, thank you for the internship rescheduling. I've been thinking about the questions you asked. You're good at those. M. Ellis. His response came in 11 minutes. I've had practice asking the wrong questions and learning from it. The right questions took longer. OC. She looked at that for a while. Then she picked up her phone and called her best friend Joanna, who listened to the full account of Thursday morning with increasing levels of disbelief and then said, So you accidentally auditioned to be a billionaire's wife and now he's emailing you about philosophy. It wasn't philosophy. It was a question about what I wanted. Mara. That's philosophy. I start the internship Monday, Mara said firmly. That's the relevant development. Said Joanna. The Caldwell Group communications floor was everything the 28th floor was not. Open plan, glass-walled meeting rooms, the controlled productive noise of people working under deadline. Screens everywhere. The particular energy of a team that was good at its job and knew it and was made slightly insufferable by the knowing, in the way that high-performing teams always were. Mara reported to a senior communications manager named Derek Holt, who was 32, excellent at his job, and conducted her onboarding with the efficient warmth of someone who genuinely liked mentoring and was busy enough that the liking had to carry the weight of the time he didn't have. You're on the Meridian account, Derek said, on her first morning. Consumer tech brand, midsize, wants to expand their European presence. We're 3 months into a campaign that isn't landing the way it should and I haven't figured out why. He slid a folder across his desk. Fresh eyes. Read everything and tell me what you think by Wednesday. She read everything by Tuesday evening. Wednesday morning, she put a 4-page document on Derek's desk. He read it while she sat across from him. His expression moved through several phases. You think the campaign is aimed at the wrong audience, he said. I think the campaign is aimed at the right audience in the wrong country, she said. The messaging is built for British consumer sensibilities. The German and French markets have different trust architectures. They respond to transparency metrics rather than lifestyle aspiration. The campaign is speaking to them in the wrong language. Derek looked at the document. The research in here. 3 evenings, she said. I know I'm supposed to take longer for a first analysis, but the pattern was visible pretty quickly and I thought sooner was more useful than more thorough. He looked at her for a moment. Where did you study? City University. Communications and business. Not strategy. I read widely, she said. He looked at the document again. I'm going to show this to the Meridian team lead, he said. Don't be surprised if it becomes something bigger than a first-week observation. It's just a starting point, she said. It's better than our starting point, he said. She went back to her desk and answered emails and did not think about the 28th floor. She thought about the 28th floor. The email came on Thursday, 1 week after the internship started. House floor 14. OC. She looked at it for a long time. She typed, interesting. I gave Derek Holt a 4-page analysis of the Meridian account on Wednesday. I think it may have caused a minor crisis. Me. I know. He forwarded it to the strategy team this morning. It caused a major crisis. The good kind. OC. A pause. Then, coffee. Saturday. Not in this building. OC. She looked at that. She looked at the internship offer letter on her desk, which had a clause about professional conduct and relationships within the organizational hierarchy that she had read and that she was currently thinking about in specific terms. She typed, "I'm an intern." "You're the CEO." "Me." His response took 4 minutes. "I'm aware of the org chart. I'm asking for coffee, not a restructuring." OC. She almost smiled. She typed, "Saturday. Not in this building." Me. The coffee place was in the West Village, small, unhurried, the kind of place that had been there long enough to have stopped trying to be anything other than what it was. He was there before her, which she had not expected. CEOs, in her limited experience, were late as a structural feature of their schedules. He was at a corner table with a coffee already and a newspaper, a physical newspaper, the actual printed kind, folded to the crossword. He looked up when she came in. In the building, he had the particular quality of someone performing the role of himself with total competence. Here, jeans, a gray sweater, no one to perform for, he was noticeably different. Not smaller. Simpler. The real shape of someone visible now that the frame had been removed. "You were early," she said, sitting down. "I'm always early," he said. "I find waiting more useful than rushing." "What do you do while you wait?" He held up the newspaper. Crossword. "I do them badly. I find it useful to do things badly that don't matter." "Why?" "Because everything I do that matters, I do well. The pressure of that accumulates." He set the newspaper down. Doing something badly and not caring is a specific kind of rest. She ordered coffee when the server came. She looked at the crossword, 3 answers filled in, the rest blank. 6 letters, starts with H, she said, reading one of the clues. Honest account. Candid, he tried. 7 letters. Candid is 7. You counted before I finished the sentence. I count things, she said. It's a habit. He looked at her with the same focused attention she remembered from the boardroom. What else do you count? The number of times someone says we versus I in a meeting. The number of seconds before a person answers a difficult question. The number of times a brand message uses the word trusted, which usually means it's trying to compensate for not being trusted. She paused. Probably too many things. Not too many, he said. Useful things. She looked at him. Why did you keep me in that room? He was quiet for a moment, one of his pauses, the kind that meant something was being considered rather than constructed. Because everyone else in the room came prepared to show me something, he said. You came to a completely different meeting and had nothing to show. And you were still the most honest person in the room. I didn't have a choice. I had no idea what the briefing document said. That's my point, he said. You were honest by default. By circumstance. He picked up his coffee. I spend most of my professional life in rooms where everyone is managing what I see of them. It's the nature of the position. People don't show me the unmanaged version. He held her gaze. You walked in with coffee from a paper cup and a portfolio for a different interview, and you told me you were in the wrong room before I could form a single impression of you. That was, he paused. That was the first genuinely unmanaged moment I'd had in a long time. The West Village coffee shop did its quiet work around them, the machine, the low conversation, the morning coming through the windows. The process, she said carefully. The selection. Is it? Suspended, he said. For now. Because of Saturday coffee with an intern? Because after Thursday I wasn't sure the process was looking for the right thing. He looked at his crossword. Candor, he said. 6 letters. Honest account. She looked at the clue. That works, she said. He wrote it in. The Meridian Crisis, as Derek had called it, became an opportunity. The strategy team had taken Mara's analysis to the European accounts director, who had taken it to the board, who had, with the particular institutional embarrassment of people confronted with something they should have seen and didn't, commissioned a full strategic review of the European market positioning. Mara was asked to sit in on the review meetings. She was an intern. She sat at the edge of the room and took notes and said nothing unless directly asked, and when directly asked she said what she saw with the plainness of someone who had not yet learned to sand down her observations for institutional comfort. She was directly asked more and more frequently. Derek, who was not a man who struggled with his ego, told her in her 4th week, "You should know that 3 of your observations from the Meridian Review are now in the formal strategy document. Under my name, because that's how the credit flows at your level. When you're not an intern, it'll flow differently. I understand how organizations work," she said. Good. He looked at her with the frank assessment of a mentor who had decided she was worth his time. You're wasted as an intern, but everybody starts somewhere. Don't be in a hurry. She was not in a hurry. She recognized this in herself with some surprise, genuinely happy. The work was good. The floor was good. The people were interesting and demanding in the right proportions. She had coffee with Oliver on the following 2 Saturdays. They did not discuss the selection process. They talked about the crossword, he was getting better, she was not being falsely encouraging about it, and about cities they had worked in and books they had read and the specific way that communications as a discipline was changing and whether the change was good. She told him about a professor at City University who had taught her that every brand was a promise and that broken promises had memory. He told her about a mentor early in his career who had said that the most expensive thing in business was a decision made from incomplete information and that most decisions were made from incomplete information. What do you do about that? She asked. You get better at identifying what you don't know, he said. Which is harder than it sounds, because the things you don't know don't announce themselves. What do you do with the things that announce themselves wrong? She said. He looked at her. Like administrative errors that send the wrong person to the wrong floor? For example, she said. The corner of his mouth moved. She had been cataloging this without meaning to, the controlled face and the corner of the mouth, the place where the control was thinnest. You work with what arrived, he said. Not what you planned for. The thing she had not expected was Sophia Chen. Of the 6 women from the boardroom on the 28th floor, Sophia was the only one she encountered again, at a gallery opening in Chelsea, 6 weeks into the internship, where Sophia was presenting a client's collection and Mara was there with Joanna who knew the gallerist. They recognized each other simultaneously. The wrong floor, Sophia said, with a smile that was warm and genuinely without edge. The right map collection, Mara said. They got wine and stood in front of a large abstract piece and talked with the ease of 2 people who had shared a strange experience and found it, in retrospect, more interesting than uncomfortable. He suspended the process, Sophia said. It wasn't a question. I think so, Mara said carefully. I know so. His assistant called me 3 weeks ago. Sophia looked at the painting. I wasn't surprised. I watched him in that room. A pause. I watched him watch you. I wasn't doing anything, Mara said. I was just sitting there. I know. Sophia looked at her. That was the thing. Mara looked at the painting, deep blue layers, something turbulent underneath the surface. Does that bother you? Sophia considered the question honestly. It would have, if I'd been sure I wanted what the process was offering. But I went into it, she paused. I went into it curious rather than certain. I wanted to see what a person who built something like the Caldwell Group was actually like. A beat. He's impressive. He's also very specifically oriented towards something particular. And that particular thing walked in from a different elevator. I work for his company, Mara said. I'm an intern. You're a person who told him he was in the wrong room before he could form an impression of you, Sophia said. You're the only person in that room who treated him like he was a regular man being asked a reasonable question instead of a CEO being interviewed. She held Mara's gaze. Do you know how rare that is, for someone in his position? Mara thought about the crossword, the gray sweater, the West Village coffee shop. I wasn't treating him any particular way, she said. I just... Exactly, Sophia said. The conversation that changed the shape of everything happened on a Tuesday evening, not a Saturday morning. Oliver had texted, they had moved to texting, which had happened gradually and without announcement, the way shifts happen when nobody makes a formal decision, to ask if she was still in the building. She was. She had been working late on a follow-up to the Meridian strategy document, the part that was hers now, officially, with her name on it. He came to the 14th floor. Not to her desk, to the small kitchen at the end of the floor, which was empty at 8:15 in the evening, and where he made 2 cups of terrible vending machine coffee with the resignation of someone who knew it was going to be bad and didn't care. He handed her one. They sat at the small table by the window, the city at night, different from the city at 8:50 in the morning, the lights making everything look like it was possible. The board is asking about the selection, he said. I know. Derek mentioned the board has been asking about several things. They want to know if I'm going to continue it or formally close it. He looked at the coffee. They have opinions about the timeline. What's your opinion? He looked at her. I think I stopped being able to think clearly about the process 6 weeks ago. Because of coffee and crosswords. Because of someone who told me she was in the wrong room and then answered a question about what she wanted with something I hadn't heard anyone say in that context. He held her gaze. I've been running a process designed to find something specific. And what I found is that the specific thing wasn't specifiable in advance. She looked at the night city. I'm an intern, Oliver. For 5 more weeks, he said. The internship ends at 12 weeks. I checked. And then? And then you're either offered a position or you aren't. Derek has told me you're going to be offered one. He paused. I had nothing to do with that. I want to be clear about that. I know you didn't, she said. I wrote the Meridian document. You did. He looked at his coffee. 5 weeks. You're thinking about org charts, she said. I'm thinking about the conversation I want to have and what the right context is for it. He looked at her directly. I am, as it turns out, not good at waiting for the right context. I'm good at most things. This is not one of them. She looked at him. The terrible vending machine coffee. The night city. The 14th floor of a building where she had arrived 5 weeks late to an interview that turned out not to matter. What's the conversation? She said. I want to know if you're interested, he said. In this. In whatever direction this is going. He said it without performance, without the managed quality she'd seen in the boardroom. Plainly, the way she had told him she was in the wrong room. I'm not asking you to decide anything. I'm asking if you're interested. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the wrong elevator and the wrong floor and the woman with the silver hair and the name card that had her name on it and the room she had never been supposed to enter. Yes, she said. It was a small word. It sat in the small kitchen on the 14th floor of the Caldwell Group building at 8:15 on a Tuesday evening, and it was the most load-bearing word she had said in a long time. Okay, he said. He did not make it bigger than it was. Did not expand it into promises or declarations or the architecture of something she would have to carry home and examine for structural integrity. He just said okay, and they drank the terrible coffee, and outside the city was full of its lights and its possibilities and its ordinary extraordinary life. The 5 weeks did not feel like waiting. They felt like, she found the word eventually, in the 4th week, accumulation. The steady gathering of small things that were building toward a shape. Saturday coffees, now occasionally Thursday evenings in the 14th floor kitchen with vending machine coffee that neither of them pretended was acceptable. Texts that started about work things and migrated into other things. The easy familiarity of two people who had started honest and had not yet found a reason to stop. He came to a communications team presentation in week 3, not at her invitation, just present, the CEO attending a departmental review, and she watched him watch the work she had been part of, the Meridian strategy document, the European repositioning, her name in the acknowledgements. His expression did not change. But she had been learning to read the things that didn't change, which was more informative than the things that did. Afterward, in the hallway, the transparency metrics framing, he said. That was yours. Derek's instinct, my research, the team's execution, she said. Derek gave me the breakdown, he said. The framework was yours. Frameworks come from somewhere, she said. I had a professor who said that every brand was a promise. And broken promises have memory, he finished. She looked at him. I told you that. You did, he said. 3 Saturdays ago. I wrote it down. She found she had nothing to say to that. Joanna, who had been updated on developments with the frequency of someone receiving dispatches from a field, summarized the situation in week 4 as follows. Let me make sure I have this straight. You took the wrong elevator, ended up at a billionaire's wife selection, told him you were in the wrong room, got rescheduled for your actual interview, got the internship, are now genuinely excellent at the job, and are also, somehow, in the margins of all this, falling for the billionaire. He's not, Mara started. His company is valued at $4 billion, Mara. The point is that's not the relevant. What is the relevant? Mara thought about the crossword filled in badly and deliberately. The vending machine coffee accepted without complaint. The way he listened, the real way, the way that meant he would say something back that proved he had actually heard. He tells me the truth, she said. Even when it's complicated. Joanna was quiet for a moment. That's the one you said required someone else. Yes, Mara said. Well, Joanna said. Then I don't have anything else to add. The 12th week arrived. Her last week as an intern. Derek called her into his office on the Monday and offered her the junior analyst position with the directness of someone who had made up his mind before she sat down. The Meridian work alone would justify it, he said. The last 3 months have been. You're the kind of hire we make once every several years, and I say that with the full awareness that you're 24 and I'm about to sound like someone who doesn't know how to calibrate a compliment. You're very good at this. Thank you, she said. I'd like to accept. Good. He looked at her with the frank, readable expression she had come to appreciate. Derek Holt, whatever his complexities, was easy to read, which was restful. I want to say something else. All right. Whatever is happening with Oliver, he paused. I'm not asking. It's not my business and I have zero interest in the internal politics of any of it. But you should know that your position here is yours. It has nothing to do with anything other than the work. He held her gaze. I want you to know that because it matters to me that you know it. I know it, she said. I wrote the documents. Yes, he said. You did. Oliver took her to dinner on the Friday of her last intern week. A proper dinner, not the West Village coffee shop, not the vending machine kitchen. A restaurant she had read about and never been to, the kind of place that was serious about food in the way that some places were serious about music, where the seriousness was not a performance but a commitment. They sat across from each other and ordered things and talked about, she would think about this later, nothing in particular and everything that mattered. His company and where he was taking it and where he wasn't sure it should go. Her analysis of the communications landscape and what she thought was about to change and why most companies were going to be 3 years late to understanding it. His father, who had taught him that patience was a strategy not a virtue. Her mother, who had told her that the most important professional skill was knowing when you were the smartest person in a room and choosing not to act like it. You do that, he said. Do what? Know when you're the smartest person in the room and not act like it. He looked at her directly. You did it in the boardroom on the 28th floor. 6 women who had prepared extensively and a CEO conducting a selection process, and you were the only one who wasn't managing an impression, and I think some of those women were very impressive people. But you weren't competing. You were just, he paused. Present, she said. Present, he said. Yes. She looked at the table, the good restaurant's careful details, the light that was doing its job without announcing itself. I didn't know I was being evaluated, she said. I was just waiting to go to floor 14. I know. He held her gaze with the directness she had long since stopped finding startling and now found simply true, simply his, the way he looked at things that mattered. That's why I told you to stay. She looked at him. Oliver, she said. Mara, he said. I want to say something and I want to say it clearly. All right. I didn't come to that room to impress you. I didn't tell you I was in the wrong room as a strategy. I haven't been, she paused. Everything that has happened in the last 12 weeks has been real. The work is real. What I've been feeling about this is real. I need you to know that it's all the same thing. The honesty and the work in this dinner. It's all the same person. He was quiet for a moment. The restaurant went about its business. I know that, he said. I've known that since Thursday morning in April when you sat down in a room you were not supposed to be in and told me the first true thing you thought of. That I was in the wrong room. That you were in the wrong room. He reached across the table, not dramatically, not as a gesture, just as a fact, and his hand covered hers on the tablecloth. You weren't, as it turned out. She looked at their hands. She looked at him. Outside the restaurant's window, New York was being entirely itself, loud, layered, full of wrong elevators and administrative errors and rooms people walked into by accident that turned out to contain the rest of their lives. No, she said. I wasn't. The elevator bank in the Caldwell Group lobby had been relabeled. Someone, she had her suspicions about who, had added small signs below the elevator call buttons, left, express to floors 20 to 40. Right, all floors. She saw it every morning when she came in. Every morning, it made her feel something that was close to laughing and close to something else, something warm and entirely without irony. She was no longer an intern. She was the head of European brand strategy for the Caldwell Group Communications Division, a title she had earned in 11 months through the Meridian account and 4 subsequent campaigns and the kind of results that made Derek Holt look like a very good talent spotter, which was exactly what he was. She had her own office. It had a window. The window did not look over Manhattan the way the 28th floor did, but it had a very nice view of the street below, and she had put a plant on the sill that was thriving. She had a 9 o'clock on the 28th floor. She had them regularly now. The rhythm of the work had taken her there and back in the natural way of things, no longer by accident, no longer with the quality of something she didn't belong to. She took the left elevator. She knew how to use it now. Oliver was already in the conference room, the same room, the pale wood table and the leather chairs and the flowers on the wall that someone still arranged, with a coffee and a folder, the same way he was always in every room before everyone else. He looked up when she came in. You're early, he said. I'm always early now, she said. I find waiting more useful than rushing. He looked at her with the corner of the mouth expression that she had been cataloging for a year and that still did what it had always done. The crossword, she said, looking at the newspaper on the table. Terrible, he said. As usual. She sat down across from him. The city was outside the window, enormous and indifferent and entirely full of wrong elevators and right rooms and all the accidental accuracy of a life that had not gone according to any plan she had made. 7 letters, she said, looking at the crossword. The thing that finds you when you stop looking for it. He looked at the clue. Fortune, he tried. She counted. 7 letters. That's 7. He wrote it in. She looked at it. That works, she said. And it did.